The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our Predictive Demand Planning webinar. This is Dallas Crawford with QueBIT. I'll be your host for today, and joining me is Scott Mutchler from the QueBIT team, and we'll introduce ourselves shortly. But just a few kind of housekeeping items. Today's webinar is recorded, and that recording will be available somewhere within the next 24 to 48 hours of the conclusion of our webinar. So if you feel like you missed a component, you will be receiving a copy of this recording to the email that corresponds with your registration, and also it will be available on our website for anyone who's interested in reviewing it or sharing it with team members and peers. Also wanted to let you guys know that there is a question pane that you should be able to see to your right in the GoToWebinar information box. So if you have any questions, please type those in as we go, and we will do our best to monitor those in progress. And if it's something that we need to address immediately, we'll try to do so, or we will definitely cover it at the conclusion of our webinar today. But really appreciate everyone joining. All right, Scott. So let's go ahead with the introduction slide here. Again, Dallas Crawford. I'm the Demand Planning Solution Lead here at QueBIT, and Scott Mutchler is our Vice President of Advanced Analytics. He's kind of been the mastermind behind this solution. Scott, you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, thanks, Dallas. This is Scott Mutchler. So I am the Vice President of Advanced Analytics here at QueBIT. And a little bit of my background is that I actually worked in retail merchandising, doing a lot of assortment planning, and in inventory management doing demand. So this is not only my passion in terms of analytics, but it's something I've spent a lot of time doing, and hopefully I can relay some of that expertise to you today.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Okay, so just an overview of our agenda. We're going to start with a brief overview of QueBIT for those of you who may not know who we are. Some of you will, so we'll keep that fairly brief, but introduce our company to you all. We will do a quick overview of and really define predictive demand planning. What does that mean? What does it mean to us? What can it mean to your business? We'll follow that with why we've brought this solution to market, which we think is really important in filling the gaps of some competitive solutions available today. And finally, we'll get to our product demonstration, and most importantly, we'll get to how you can learn more and work with us, and we'll get to Q&A. So a little bit about us, at QueBIT here, we consider ourselves trusted experts in analytics, and I think that's something that sets us apart from most, is that we very rigorously focus on all things data and analytics. So anything that involves the transformation, the maintenance, and the deriving of good information and analytics we involve in. So everything from your data warehousing and reporting up through your financial management, planning and modeling, in addition to that, predictive modeling. So really a broad breadth of capabilities. Traditionally, we have been an IBM business partner. We've actually been their business partner of the year for the past 5 consecutive years, so it's an honor that we take to heart, as it shows our performance as an analytics partner for them. But also, we have a very strong customer base here at QueBIT, and we've just received their Innovation Award for an outstanding line of business solution, which really contains the predictive demand planning solution that we will be demonstrating and covering today. And truthfully, one other thing that I want to highlight about our team is you see that we have over 400 customers, but the beauty of that is most of those customers, if not all, are referenceable customers. We focus rigorously on delivering on our analytics solutions. So it's not just about getting a tool in the hands of our clients, but really enabling with solutions that will help them be profitable. So a little bit about what predictive demand planning is. You know, we really want to combine the back-end data science, right? So many systems today, many forecasting processes today, you know, they have some level of manually driven, tried and true tribal knowledge type leaning, right? They really lean heavily on either the demand planning team, their sales team, their inventory management team, and they depend on the historical experience in a marketplace, historical experience in the industry, historical sales, which are great indicators. And you know, there's a reason businesses haven't fallen flat. It's not that this strategy is ineffective, but what we try to do is leverage all of that, combine it with data and science that allows you to take it much further in a more automated fashion, and really allow that to help you drive the process. So the objective is to not replace these people who have tremendous experience with these solutions, but the goal is to really infuse a ton of data and analytics into their decision-making process so that they can subsequently make the most informed and, you know, the correct business decisions, I would say. So combining that back-end analytics and science, presenting it to the user in a place where they can interact with it, run scenarios, make adjustments, and leverage the things that make all of us really successful, which are our intuition and our knowledge of our business and our customer base. So it's enhancing the decision process. One of the ways we do that, and we'll get more deeply into this later, but we use a metric of forecast value add, which measures effectiveness of multiple versions, and we'll dig into the details. But this allows us during the forecasting cycle, and most importantly, as we review and try to adjust the system or adjust business processes associated with demand planning, it allows us to understand what things are driving us to be successful, what things might be relevant to our demand forecasting or planning process that we haven't accounted for, and really bring those into the fold. And then finally, and most importantly, the objective of this solution is to really create that collaborative environment across multiple teams. So we do not want to limit this solution to just the sales team, just the inventory team, or the Office of Finance. And you'll see a lot of this as we go throughout our product demonstration. But our solution is really about taking an initial forecasting challenge or demand planning challenge in general, presenting an intelligent forecast to the users, but then allowing it to flow through a very natural S&OP process while giving the sales team a way to interact, providing that visibility to the inventory and order management side of the house, and then finally providing the reporting and planning capability that's so critical for the finance department who's managing income statements, cash flow, things of that nature. So it's really about bringing all of these together. All right? And, you know, why did we bring this solution to market? Really, and I touched on this on the previous slide, but you know, many of our competitors and our customers have, whether they're using competitive solutions or using Excel or other more manual planning processes today, really based heavily on seasonal trends that they understand, that come from their group and what they know. It does not include some of the things that we've found really through a lot of our implementations with previous clients to be major indicators of what your demand could be. We call these causal variables, but the ability to include the impact of sources like weather, pricing, promotions, socioeconomic data, you name it, being able to infuse that into your forecasting process. And some of you may be doing this today, some of you may not, but to also be able to automate that process and feed it to your team in a way that they can consume it and make decisions from it is really why we brought this solution to bear. We also noticed that a lot of our clients struggle with two key areas. Predicting demand for new items and low velocity items are equally rigorous, and it's because the inputs to that process aren't easily predictive, and certainly not, they don't fall into kind of that textbook, seasonal or trend type forecasting. A new item, especially if you don't have an exact like-to-like comparison, you really struggle to understand how it's going to perform in the marketplace. A lot of times you're just using a gut feel. With low velocity items, which are things that turn, once a month per store or per customer if you're on the CPG or manufacturing side. So it's things that don't turn often, but they're often highly profitable, right? So how do you best understand demand, again, for things that don't behave in a very easily predicted manner? That's what the level of detail in our QueBIT forecasting engine and in our solution, the level of detail in the modeling and being able to get down to that SKU level is really the problem that we're trying to solve. Then the other gap, because some companies have solved that initial forecasting piece, but the other gap is, well, how do you then interact with that data? How do you run scenarios and test against it? How do you understand? So it's great that you understand that GDP, for an example, has an impact on your business, but how do you run a test to determine what a 2% fall in GDP might equate to for your business? How do you run a test that determines what a major tropical storm or a prediction that you're going to have an unseasonably warm September? How do you react to climate elements or other elements that are out of your control or in your control, like promotions? Being able to interact with these things and test them are really key. And then, finally, again, how do we break down the silos? A lot of companies have, S&OP groups. They have VPs of S&OP, but the reality is a lot of these groups still act in silos, and then they come together for their weekly S&OP meetings and pretend to all be reading from the same sheet of music when we know that's really not the case. Our goal is to help you break down those silos, break down those barriers across the company, but do it in a way that enables everyone to contribute, do it in an intelligent way, and do it in a measurable way. We really look forward to this. I'm going to pass it to Scott now, but if you can't hear or feel my passion, hopefully you will see for yourself what the potential benefit is and what the power of the solution is as we move forward. Scott.
Thanks, Dallas. And as one little piece of housekeeping, I don't know if Dallas mentioned this or not, but you can ask questions. Feel free to enter them into the question pane in the GoToWebinar, and we will leave a little bit of time at the end, hopefully, to answer those questions. Dallas and I are pretty passionate about this, so it's going to be difficult to leave a lot of time, but we will do the best we can. I do want to talk a little bit about, so I'm a data scientist, and I really want to talk about how data science makes a difference in this application. And it's not just that we have better algorithms. I think we have a better approach. And the approach that we're taking here is to identify drivers of the demand. So that can be things like weather, which is not in your control, but can also include things that you can control, like how much do you spend on marketing in different channels? How do you price your products? And based on that data, we then marry that together with your historical demand, and we can generate forecasts that are not just naive, hoping that the trend continues. They are really driven by what those drivers are doing. So if you are planning to make changes in your business, and most businesses are pretty dynamic, what are those impacts going to have, or what are those impacts going to be on your demand and on your profitability? And we really wanted to tie that all together into one system, which we think is fairly unique. I wanted to just real quickly go through an example of a real-world example of a store SKU combination and look at the time series data for unit sales. So this is unit sales for a SKU at a particular store. And if you look at it, it's sort of hump-shaped. It has a very linear upward trend through the beginning of 2014, and then it drops off like a rock. Now, the question is, how would predictive forecasting help us to do a better job of identifying these types of trends where it's not just simply going up or going down in a nice linear predictable way? Well, we believe that the answer is in including causal data. And so here's an example. We have this hump-shaped demand. And the first thing we would do is remove seasonality. And believe it or not, there is seasonality in that data. And that's what that orange line represents. And once we've removed seasonality, we're left with an underlying trend. And you can see that this trend is fairly linear from 2012 to 2014. And if we took a naive approach, the rest of 2014, 2015, we would assume that this thing is going to continue to go up and it's going to generate a tremendous amount of unit sales. But in reality, we see it drops off pretty dramatically. So the question is why, and how do you use predictive analytics to adjust your forecast based on this underlying causal relationship? And so naive forecasting with linear, it would start out with a very upward trend. The overall trend of this whole time series is still upwards, believe it or not. And so if you were to use a simple trend forecast, you would think that next year you're going to continue to grow the sales on this unit, and it's just not true. But if you look a little deeper at the causal data and you look at marketing spend, what you find is that there's a high degree of correlation between marketing spend and the unit sales. So this was something that the company was ramping up their marketing spend and then eventually pulled back for whatever reason, and that's the underlying cause of the deflation in this particular unit. Now, if you're using a simple technique that doesn't include marketing spend or the other variables that are going on, you're not going to see this trend. You're just going to continue to predict that upward trend going forward. So if you combine the two together, and you use the marketing trend, you end up with what is a reasonable fit for the historical data, the blue data, and then the orange represents the forecast, and you can get a realistic forecast going forward. So you can see that the realistic forecast going forward based on marketing spend is much flatter, much lower, and is not an upward trend. And so we believe that this is where a lot of the value is created in forecasting, and it's the technique that we employ in our solution. And you'll see that this is sort of the back-end engine analytics piece of it, but now I'm going to show you in a demo what it looks like to do it in a collaborative, user-friendly environment.
Yeah, and just real quick, Scott, if I could add that to me is the second and equally important piece, is that you have the ability to then interact with these variables that the model determines are critical and make business decisions on how you will leverage them. Marketing spend being a prime example. Had they understood this relationship from the models that Scott just showed, they could have easily made better ad spend decisions or things of that nature.
Great point. So I also want to just quickly touch on the other areas that we handle in sort of a unique way. One is new store SKU combinations. So this could be new SKUs that are new to your supply chain, or they could be new in that location. There's a challenge of knowing what's the demand going to look like for the first year or two. And traditionally what most people do is, as Dallas alluded to, is they find a like-for-like product and they substitute the demand. Well, what happens if this is something relatively new that you've never had in that store, or it's a new SKU? Well, our approach is slightly different in that we use predictive models along with attributes of the store, so things like store demographics and other store characteristics like balance of sales and who their customers are, customer demographics, and also product features like price, attributes of the product, its quality level. In this example, we're looking at electronics, so it's looking at how much storage it has, and we break that down, and we train predictive models that can then accurately predict the demand for any new store SKU combination, not just ones where you have an exact like for like. And we've had tremendous success using this in the past to generate that demand to seed the forecasts. And this is really helpful when you're seeding a replenishment forecast, because what happens is a lot of replenishment systems start out with a very low number initially, and what happens is you end up losing a bunch of demand because you're not replenishing it fast enough. If you have this type of a model where you can accurately predict what the first 52 weeks of demand is going to be, then you can have your replenishment system set up correctly from the beginning and not lose that demand. As a side benefit to this whole process, you get deep learning, deep understanding of what variables are driving demand for different products. And so you see there's different things, marketing and demographics are some of the top here, but price is also important. And one of the things you can do is also play what-if scenarios with this. So I'm going to show you what-if scenarios with established products where you have time series data, but you can also do what-if scenarios with new SKUs and also optimize pricing. So in this example, the predictive model, when we set a price of $499, we generate 1,145 units. If we go up to $699, the units drop off fairly dramatically. They more than cut down by 50%, and so you can start looking at profitability of new store SKU combinations. So just an interesting aside there. And then last thing I'll mention before I go into the demo, before we get to the exciting stuff, is that our process is also fully automated. So there's no need for human interaction during the forecasting piece. Now when you're doing what-if scenarios, that's something you're going to want to have a human interacting with. But the process of generating the base forecast that includes all the causal data, that's what we call the system forecast. That is fully automated. And the system determines what type of model it goes through, the model that's based on historical sales and causal data, or what we call the bootstrap model, where there's no historical sales, but we've got product attributes and causal data. And again, that process is fully automated. So without further ado, I'd like to switch over to a demo. And the scenario here is that I am a sales manager at a retailer that sells sporting goods equipment. And I'm responsible for cycling equipment. And I need to go in and review forecasts, do what-ifs, check out alerts, and do all kinds of different things. And so I'm going to log in as Sales Manager A. And the first thing you're going to be greeted with is a sort of a dashboard that gives you an overview of everything that's going on across the company. So this is company-wide, and I'll go through each section of the screen here because I know it's a lot to look at. So we're looking at all product categories, and we're looking at all DC locations, and we're going to get a bunch of summary information here that's going to help us drive our day-to-day action. So when I come in, first thing I want to do is look at the state of the business, determine what needs to be done, determine what might need to be tweaked, and I'm going to go in and start playing with different scenarios to see the impact to both inventory and also to the P&L. So the first thing you'll notice in the upper left is that we have our how we're doing relative to plan. So we're 97% of plan through July of 2015. That's the time period over which this data is set up. We're 102% of the plan year to date, which is great, and we're 101% for a trailing 12 months, and it's broken out by month, and you can see the difference between forecast, which is dark blue, actuals, which is light blue, and a plan, which is gray. So you get a real quick overview of that. I'm specifically the manager for cycling, so I'm going to switch over to see how things are going with cycling versus looking at the whole company, all product categories. And you'll see that it's pretty similar. I do have somewhat of a shortfall for July that I need to look at. I'm going to slide over to the right here, and this is one of the concepts that Dallas touched on, is this idea of forecast value add. And what we see here is a breakdown through different time periods, a trailing 3 months, a trailing 6 months, a trailing 12 months. And what we're comparing is the planned unit demand versus the actuals versus all the different versions of the forecast. So the system forecast is the one that is that base predictive forecast that is generated automatically. And that's usually pretty spot on if it has good data to go in. But there's sometimes when the sales manager will need to update that forecast based on some knowledge that they have that's outside the system. Like, for example, they may get information that certain suppliers can't provide certain product, or they may know that there's going to be a shortfall in available to promise or on-order inventory, and so they're going to have to make some adjustments. Or maybe they know about some promotion that's for some reason not in the causal data. So the sales rep will go through and adjust the forecast, and then the sales manager will come through and review that forecast and potentially do an additional adjustment. And the idea here is to be able to look at actuals versus these different forecast versions and see, is the rep adding value? Are they getting closer to actuals than the system forecast? And is the sales manager even doing a better job than the sales rep? And what this allows us to do is quickly identify who in the sales team is quite frankly doing a good job on keeping their forecast accurate. And we'll go into some tracking that might maybe help us understand why it might not be accurate. They can put comments in. But as you can see, the rep is about 2% over, the sales manager is about 2.1% under, and overall they're about 1.9%. So we're pretty close, but this would allow you to dissect down to a very fine level where we're doing well in terms of forecasting and where we're not doing well in terms of forecasting. Okay, so the lower left is my workflow driving area. So this is my submission status. So I'm responsible for cycling as the manager, and this is going to show me everything that's out there in terms of cycling and DCs and what status it's in. So it can be in progress, it can be approved, it can be waiting for me to review it. I'm going to switch it over and specifically look at what's assigned to the sales manager, which is me, and see what's out there that hasn't been done yet. So there's still two DCs that need to be reviewed, and I need to go to those and adjust any forecasts that I think might need to be adjusted, and then finally approve them and then let it flow into the fulfillment system. Over to the lower right, we see something that's very important, which is our alerts. So the system is continuously monitoring the forecast accuracy, and it's looking at this detailed forecast value add analysis and coming up with alerts. Now these alerts are configurable, and it could be, you know, for the last 3 months the system forecast is less than the plan, or it could be that for the last, I'm sorry, that's for the next 3 months. For the last 3 months, the sales rep forecast has been 10% under the sales manager forecast, and you can set them up to be configurable. So let's just look at the first one here, which is the sales manager forecast is less than 95% of plan for the next 3 months. So in other words, our forecast is not going to meet plan. So someone, the CFO or CEO is going to be wanting to know why we didn't meet that plan. So let's take a look at that alert and see if we can figure out what's going on. Again, that alert was auto-generated by the system. And I'm going to scroll over here to the right just to make it a little clearer. What we have here is we have some notes being put in and some reason codes being put in by the sales rep. So the sales rep has been talking to the supplier, and the supplier says, well, there's a recall on a bunch of these items. We can't supply it to you for a couple of months until we get the replacement item in place, and that's part of the reason why we are missing our forecast. So now we can start thinking about, okay, what can we do to drive more demand? How can we play with drivers, things that we do like marketing spend, to drive additional demand to make up for that shortfall? So I'm going to go ahead and click on the first SKU here to go to SKU Input. And what this screen does is it really allows us to, at a very granular level, look at what's going on in terms of the causal data and the predicted output. So you can see that for a couple of months here, we're not going to have it stocked in any stores while it's taken out of service for the replacement item to come in. So we have a shortfall of demand on this unit demand line. And what we'd really like to do is let's see if we can make that up somewhere. So what we're going to do, as just an example of what we can do, is go to SKUs here, and we're going to turn it to all, and we're going to look at our top 5 SKUs in this category and see if maybe we can do something to drive a little bit more demand to make up for that shortfall. So right now what we have is this unit demand here. So first of all, the gray represents actuals, the blue represents the predictive forecast. And the predictive forecast is consuming this data here that is causal data. That's the number of stores we stock it in, the price, and the ad spend that we're making that is driving that unit demand. So we can actually start to play what if scenarios. Said, well, what if we increase ad spend? Could we drive some more units? What if we stocked it in a few more stores? Maybe the QueBIT assortment planning solution has recommended to stock it in some additional stores. Or what if we lowered price as a temporary, just to drive more units to make up that shortfall? And then we can see the effects. So what I'm going to do is, since this is the front-end interface here is TM1, we have a bunch of great functionality that's kind of built into TM1, like data spreading. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a hypothetical what ifs here to add this particular SKU to 25 locations. And you see that it automatically spread that across. And I'll go down and just for fun I'll do another one here. And I'll put this one in 30 locations. And now we don't really know what the effect of doing that would be, but we do have this great forecasting engine in the background that consumes this causal data and updates the forecast. So if I click, well, first of all, let's take note of what the demand is. Sorry I'm moving around a lot here, but it's a pretty detailed screen. So we have about 62,000 and 69,000 units here. Let's see what we can make up by increasing the store stocking. So when I click update, it's going to call the QueBIT forecasting engine in the background, and it's going to reforecast those SKUs. Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry, I clicked the wrong button. I apologize. Let me just fix this real quick. And click Run Forecast. I apologize, I clicked the wrong button. I got a little excited. So update just updates the data back to what it was originally. So let's go ahead and do Run Forecast. And it's going to go out and run the QueBIT forecasting engine. And it's going to update the screen here. And you can see that we picked up almost an additional 340 units per month here. And so we pick up an additional 4,000 units. And then we have the same thing for this one. Although interestingly, we added this to more stores. We didn't pick up as many unit sales because it's not as quite a high mover. But again, this is based on the forecasting engine rerunning with that new causal data. So we picked up some additional demand, but let's just say that wasn't good enough. What we really want to do now is see if we can update the bigger picture and do a more broad brush change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the demand planning input screen. Now this is one of the key screens where you'll do a lot of your work and a lot of collaboration. And it's a bit busy, so let me explain it to you. So I'm looking at cycling, and I'm looking at it in a specific DC, and I'm starting in August 2014. Over to the right, I have a number of months being shown, and the blue months represent future, and the light blue represent actuals. And then down here in the bottom, we have a bunch of different rows of data. So we have the first row is the system is the actuals. Then we have the system forecast, which is the base forecast by the predictive engine. Then we have the salesperson forecast, which is going to be slightly different because it's been modified. And then we have the sales manager forecast, which again can be modified. And then we have the approved, if it's been approved. And we have the plan, and then we have the on order. Now the on order is the inventory that's available to promise.
Yeah.
So, and then down at the bottom we have some additional causal data. So the causal data here is slightly different than what was shown before. It's actually weather data, and it's not possible to forecast weather with any degree of confidence beyond a few days. But what you can do is do what if type of scenarios that says, well, what if it's a very, very rainy week next week, or a very rainy week in Southwest, or for this DC. And then you also have ad spend. Now ad spend is something that is going to be a high-level variable that we can change and see what it does to our demand. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the actual chart up here and turn off a few things. And so we have a we have a sales manager forecast and a sales rep forecast and a system forecast, and you can see that they're all fairly connected here out into the future. But what we can do now is we can do those same what-if type of scenarios down here at the lower level. So what we can do for the future here is let's go ahead and ramp up the marketing spend to 1 million across the board. Now, when we update the forecast here, we're not updating just one SKU. We are reforecasting every single SKU in cycling across the Baltimore distribution center. So we are literally generating hundreds and hundreds of forecasts using this new updated ad spend. So I'm going to go ahead and click update. And this is going to take a second to run, but this is going to go ahead and run all those forecasts and give us an updated forecast.
And while that updates, I just wanted to make a quick note to the audience that, you know, we're using hotkeys or, you know, an instant ability to just run, you know, $1 million across the board, but you could very easily, in fact, you could do it in this interface. It's just we're trying to move the demo along quicker, but you can update single month or single set of months. You can update every month with different amounts. So I just want to make sure that you all know that there's a high level of flexibility when you're making these adjustments.
Right. So again, if I come here and I turn off some of these additional things, you can see that there's going to be additional separation between the system forecast and the actual forecast based on these changes to the marketing, to the ad spend, and you can directly model that and see how you're doing. Now, one of the other things is now since you have visibility into inventory, this is where inventory management comes in. They're going to see your on-order inventory, and they can directly compare it to these what-if scenarios, and we can see that there's going to be a significant shortfall in May 2016 for inventory, and then we can start drilling down. That's also going to generate alerts that would go to inventory management so that they can be alerted that the fact that there's going to be a shortfall in available to promise or on-order inventory. And then last but not least, and one of the most exciting things is since this tool is delivered in TM1, which traditionally is a it's pretty much the best financial planning tool out there, we can take all of these what-if scenarios and all these approved plans and run them directly into financial planning. And what that allows us to do through the use of sandboxing is to compare you can look at what would change in the overall income statement based on A, either what-if scenarios, or B, on what the different versions of the approved forecast are. So you can switch between the different versions of the forecast and see what that does to the P&L. So based on the sales manager's forecast, this is what the P&L looks like. And you'll notice that the areas that are blue, those are the areas that are changed based on what you've been doing in your recent work. So as I went in and updated the forecast on those individual SKUs, and then I went in and updated the forecast on the higher level based on the overall ad spend, now you get a direct viewable impact to the income statement, which is pretty exciting because if you have your CFO wanting to understand what next month might look like, you can come in, and they're not happy, you can come in, adjust things, and really get a good idea of how you can drive the results that he or she are looking for. So Dallas, anything else you want to add on this before we go back to the presentation?
No, you can go back to the presentation, but I do want to hit on what you said at the end. You know, many times you get into, you know, an S&OP meeting where you're working on a consensus plan, and there's a lot of people looking at a lot of separate systems and bringing in their own spreadsheet that represents, you know, kind of their departmental view. And even in that setting, when you're exchanging information, at the end of the day, you're leaving with a bunch of to-dos. This system and the performance, if you saw, you know, Scott reforecasted an entire category for this particular retailer, you know, over 300 SKUs within about, you know, less than 5 seconds. So when you're able to do those types of things, now you can do these scenario models when you're in these meetings and really, really be productive when you have the whole crew there. So again, we're all about leveraging the capabilities of these solutions and the integration of the forecasting, the planning, and reporting to deliver something soup to nuts for all channels that will really enhance collaboration across your organization. The other thing that I want to highlight is, you know, today's demonstration was sales focused, right? So it was a sales manager scenario. Some organizations have their category managers manage that demand planning process. Some have inventory managers manage that process. So the roles and you know, even some of the charting is configurable, right? But the beauty is this solution in terms of the charting and the forecasting and the planning capabilities you saw are very, very rapidly able to be developed and built. And as you can see on the slide that Scott has up, extremely rapid deployment timeline with minimal configurations and customizations. This solution can be ready within 4 weeks, which I don't know of many people in the marketplace who can deliver on that promise. The other thing that's important to note is it's flexible. We can deliver this in a fully operable SaaS, software as a service, or cloud environment, or we can do it on-premise. We'd like to kind of sit down with you and understand what really fits the way your organization does business and manages the infrastructure for your group. Again, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but really integrating the forecasting, the planning, and reporting are core to why this solution was developed, and infusing science in that process to enhance the gut feel, not remove it, but to augment it. And at the end of the day, what you get, which is, you know, I think one of the things that drives Scott and I the most is this solution is impactful to both the top and bottom line. There aren't many solutions out there that can claim that, but when you improve your ability to forecast, not only do you impact excess inventory and carrying things, you know, overstocking or things of that nature, but you also improve the availability that things of items that are in demand from your customers or consumers, and at the end of the day, you increase satisfaction along with growing that top line because items are available when your customers need it at the exact point in time. So, you know, it's really, 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 you know, something that we're excited about. We've been doing this for a very long time. If you'd like to speak to some of our customers, we gladly kind of set you up for a reference call at the appropriate time. But I do think it's important for you to check our website where we have a little bit more of an overview on our predictive demand planning. You can see my contact information, Scott's contact information, to access us for any more detailed discussions or necessary demonstrations for a broader group of your team. And also on the website we have some existing case studies, and we'll actually be putting 2 more up in the very near future. So exciting stuff for us, and happy to open it up for any questions or comments thus far. Okay, so I see one question here. Can you do this at a product family level and extend that to the SKU base on a proportion? That is an excellent question, and the answer is absolutely. We realize that not everybody forecasts has the capacity or the willingness or the need to forecast at a SKU level, right? There are plenty of people who the trade-off in terms of level of energy versus return, it's not that great to go down to that SKU level, or you sacrifice accuracy. So absolutely, we can do it at a product family or category level, and leverage some of the modeling capabilities within TM1 to then explode that demand or allocate that demand back across the SKUs proportionately within that group. So, the short answer is yes, total company level, product family level, DC level, you name it, and we can handle it at any level of the hierarchy. But that was an excellent question.
And I just want to add to that, Dallas, we do want to remember that if you're going to use causal data, you just want to make sure that your causal data makes sense at the level that you're aggregating your demand. So it's absolutely doable, but you want to make sure that whatever data you're going to use to help predict makes sense at that particular level. So sometimes at product group level it makes complete sense. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So that's something that we would help you determine whether it's appropriate or not.
Right. We had another question here. Oh, here we go. The gentleman in the audience was looking at the forecast value add, found it interesting, and is wondering how you incorporate that feedback more formally into the modeling process, which is a good question. Today, if you look at the sales rep making adjustments, there are some things that you cannot account for. A supplier recall being one of them, right? That's not something you can build into a model. That kind of just happens. But there are other things that a rep or an inventory manager or a demand planner, there may be causal variables that are either new variables that correlate to your forecast, or some things that the reps or planners may know inherently. And those are things that, as we look at the forecast value add and find the individuals who are adding value to the process, we conduct a review with them either on a quarterly or semi-annual basis to get that feedback. And then if the variables are controllable, we'll build them into the model. Scott, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I just want to add to that that's one of the deliverables. One of the features of this solution is that we do have reporting around aggregated reporting around reason codes, and also we have the text that went along with it. So when you do that review, you're going back and saying, look, you were under 12 times out of 24. Here's where your top reasons. Let's dig into that. Is that reason somehow quantifiable that we could then incorporate that into the model?
Great, thanks. All right, we had one more question here, Scott, and if you have any other questions, you feel free to shoot them in. There's one here. They noticed the income statement report that quickly showed the impact on the new plan. How flexible is the reporting capability to extend into more detailed, either SKU level reporting or other areas such as cash flow analyses? Great question. The answer is it is extremely flexible. Many of these reports, once the data is available in the system or loaded in, which is quite easy, the system has built-in ETL capability that can connect to pretty much any not pretty much, it can connect to any ODBC compliant data source, or it can handle flat files, CSVs, Excel extracts, things of that nature. And once the data is in, it's very rapid. For someone who understands how to build the reports, which we would train up on in just a few days, you would have the capability to probably build any one of these reports at any level, so at the SKU, product family, or category level, or depending on what your what elements you care about, whether it's the income statement or you want to understand cash flow and the impact of maybe purchasing raw materials ahead or things of that nature. But all of those, once you have the data loaded into the system, are few hour to maybe a day exercise for an experienced report builder. And again, you become an experienced report builder within a few days if you have decent knowledge of Excel, which many of our clients already do. All right. And then there was one more question around implementation timeline, and it's anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks. We think we can stick pretty close to a very compressed cycle with minimal changes. But if there are really unique considerations that may drive us closer to 2 months than 1. But by and large, this solution is able to be deployed because of our forecasting engine and the ease of deployment of the front end. It's able to be deployed, and the ease of connectivity on the data side, able to be deployed very rapidly. I don't know, Scott, if you had anything you wanted to add to that in terms of technical reasons.
Yeah, it's the if it's being deployed in the cloud, the data that we need is fairly well defined, and so that makes it a little easier than some other types of projects, and so that's where we get these rapid turnarounds. It also makes it easy for us to do proof of concept, so you can see what it looks like with your data, which I know is important to a lot of people. You want to see how good's the forecast, and we can definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we can give everyone, it doesn't look like we have any questions here remaining, so we may do the most exciting thing of the day, which is give some of our guests 5 minutes back in their day. And again, that's about as good as you can expect. So we really appreciate everyone's time here today. And please, take a look at the screen. You see my contact information. I have national responsibility for our demand and assortment planning solutions. You see Scott's contact information there. Do not hesitate to use this. Take a screen capture now so you don't lose it, but we will also, again, be sending follow-up information and this recording of today's session, so you'll have plenty of opportunity. But don't hesitate to contact us if you're intrigued or interested in doing some further discovery around this. We do think that this has the potential to be game-changing, and hopefully you caught a glimpse of that today, and we can discuss it further here in the near future. But with that, we again thank you for your time, and we say goodbye and have a great day from the QueBIT team.